can't believe it's already April. The year is absolutely flying by. I felt like January was like really trudging along for a long time, and now it's April all of a sudden. But I have read 13 books so far this year, and I'm super excited to just do a quick recap of all of them for you, get you caught up on my reading journey thus far. I have been in a reading slump since the end of last year, and I feel like I'm pretty much out of it at this point, so I'm hoping that I'll be able to continue to ramp up my reading over the summer because there's a lot of books on my TBR that I want to get to, so I need to pick up the pace. And a lot of those books are really long, so wish me luck. My first read of the year was actually with my book club, and it's Dungeon Crawler Carl. I'm sure you've probably heard of it. So many people are talking about it right now, and for good reason. In the story, you're following Carl and his ex-girlfriend's cat, Princess Donna, as they sort of navigate this like end of the world scenario where they have to descend into a multi-level fantasy dungeon that's full of traps and interesting characters, and it's super freaking fun. I was captivated immediately at the beginning of the story. The audiobook is so well done. You have to listen to this on audiobook. I feel like it's probably the preferred way to consume this, and it's an absolute blast. And Princess Donut is probably the best character ever. Also, if you're just like a general fan of fantasy, sci-fi, video games, Dungeons and Dragons, you will love this book, I promise you. Next, I read Pillow Thoughts by Courtney Peppernell. I picked up one of her books. This is a poetry collection, and I picked up one of her books in Barnes & Noble one day, and I read it, flipped through it, and I felt like I really liked it, so I wanted to start at some of her earlier works. This just felt like very peak 2016 poetry. Very like cliche. I didn't love it. I probably wouldn't recommend this one unless you're trying to feel real nostalgic for that time period, which I am not. Next, I read Yours for the Taking. This is a super interesting book where climate change has really drastically changed the livable landscape, and one of the only ways that you can guarantee your survival is if you are a part of the Inside Project, which are these kind of isolated silos essentially in which you can live. One reclusive billionaire becomes a director over one of these inside projects, and she sort of uses this as an opportunity to test some of her like wild and unorthodox feminist theories. So this book really does explore white corporate feminism and what happens when you take those ideals to the extreme and sort of like the long-term consequences of that. I thought it was an interesting read, not my favorite in the feminist literature genre. I felt like it was pretty forgettable. If it sounds interesting, maybe give it a try, but for me it just wasn't like mind-blowing or earth-shattering, and I didn't find the characters super enjoyable to read. Then with my book club, again, we read The Great Alone by Kristin Hannah. This is a story where you're following a young girl named Lenny who her and her family pick up one day and move to a very remote and rural part of Alaska, probably at a terrible time. Her family is very complex and also quite abusive, and so now Lenny sort of has to navigate this new landscape of rural Alaska, which is deadly in and of itself, and then also, you know, the isolation of being with her abusive family. There's amazing found family in this book, and I think the landscape of Alaska is so incredibly vivid and well done. I absolutely loved this book. It brought me to tears at so many points throughout the story, and I thought it was so well done. Although I didn't love the ending of this book, I thought she probably could have taken it in a different direction. Overall, I thought it was really good. A lot of people told me to read The Nightingale next, so I think that's probably going to be my next Kristin Hannah read. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Didn't love the ending, but overall, I thought it was really good. The next book I read, I do try to throw in a little bit of nonfiction here and there, and I heard so many good things about this next book, The Courage to be Disliked, and I was like, perfect. In this book, you're following basically a conversation between a philosopher and a young man about God knows what. This book was written in probably the most boring way possible. It was not engaging or interesting, and honestly, it was deeply harmful to people who have experienced trauma, because I think one of the biggest points of this book was that trauma is a choice, and that's strongly argued throughout the book, and so I thought this was not very good, honestly. I just found it extremely boring, extremely unengaging, extremely harmful, and I just didn't like this at all. I would absolutely not recommend. So in order to cheer myself up, I read Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands, and Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales. This one was a reread for me because I read this when it first came out, and then the third book had come out fairly recently, so I wanted a refresher of kind of what happened in this book before I jumped into this one. If you are new to the Emily Wilde series, there are 3 books. You'll want to start with Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, and in pretty much all of these books, you're following Emily Wilde, who is a genius scholar who is writing the world's very first encyclopedia of fairies, or in the books, it's referred to as the field and study of dryadology. These books are like the definition of like cozy and whimsical, so if you like a good cozy fantasy, I would definitely recommend checking out this series. The audiobooks are also incredible for this. Love Heather Fawcett, love this series. Then I read A Sea of Unspoken Things by Adrienne Young. In the story, you're following James, whose twin brother was recently killed in a tragic accident. James and her brother have always had a very deep connection, so much so that the instant that her brother was killed, she already knew that something was very, very wrong. As she's sort of going through the grieving process, she realizes that connection that she has with her brother is still seemingly there. She comes home to settle her brother's affairs, and secrets begin to surface, sort of forcing James to face this very like secretive and ominous past that she has. And also she begins to question if her brother really is the person that she thinks that he was. So I thought this was super interesting, very on par for Adrienne Young. It was okay. It wasn't my favorite. Again, I still really enjoyed it, but it's not the most memorable book, I would say. It's not something that's really stuck with me. Books that I really enjoy are books that I find that stick with me for a really long time, and also that I continue to think about far after the book is over, and I honestly haven't thought about this book at all. So next, I read The Undead Fox of the Deadwood Forest, and this is a very eerie and magical middle grade story where you're following a character named Claire, whose job is essentially to usher lost and wandering souls into their next phase in the afterlife. And one day, a badger named Ginger Snipes stumbles into the Deadwood Forest and runs into Claire. And despite Claire's best efforts, Ginger Snipes is seemingly not able to pass into any of the 4 different realms that she should be able to go into. And so Claire and Ginger Snipes sort of have to set out on this adventure to unravel the mystery that sort of threatens the delicate balance between the living and the dead. I am a huge fan of middle grade. I love whimsical middle grade at that, so this was like right up my alley. I saw the beautiful cover and I knew I had to read it immediately. And I thought this was such a great story with really wonderful themes of just acceptance and grief. It's so good. I think you should read it. I would definitely recommend reading it in the fall time. It's just like good vibes for the fall time, like October. Definitely would recommend. So good. Next, I read Wild Dark Shore. In this, you're following Dominic and his 3 children, who are the only inhabitants of an island called Shearwater, which is home to one of the world's largest seed banks. With sea levels rising, Dominic and his kids are forced to pack everything up, all of the seeds, all of their belongings, and set on a journey to safer ground. During one of the worst storms that they've seen in a really long time, a woman washes up on shore, alive, but not doing so hot as you might imagine. And so they take her in and nurse her back to full health. Throughout this whole process, they have grown very close to the woman who washed up on shore. There's definitely a found family element to this story, but there's also a dark underlying mystery, as the current inhabitants have a very dark and secretive past, as does the woman who washed up on shore. And so there's sort of this underlying tension of questioning who is telling the truth and also what is the truth. And so you're sort of unraveling that throughout the story, and it's very good. I would say this is probably one of my top reads of the year. I thought the setting was absolutely captivating. The characters are so unique. They have very clear and distinct voices. The found family element, again, is really well done. I just could go on and on about how much I really enjoyed this book, so I would highly recommend it to anybody who is interested in picking it up or that sounds somewhat interesting. It is probably going to be one of my top reads of this year. Next, I read The Unworthy, which is by Agustina Basarica. She also wrote Tender is the Flesh, if you're familiar with that one. I haven't read it, so this is actually my first read by this author. In this story, you're reading sort of the diary entries of an unnamed woman who's living in this post-apocalyptic convent of women called the Sacred Sisterhood. She is a lower member of the Sacred Sisterhood, and she sort of aspires and dreams to ascend the ranks of the enlightened. Outside of this convent, the world is in absolute shambles. It's plagued with catastrophes, cities are underwater, and the survivors are sort of foraging and fighting in a very very bleak landscape, and the women inside of the Sacred Sisterhood convent are controlled heavily, but they are also safe. This is a very quick read. I just love dystopian feminist literature. This one was so good. I've heard a lot of mixed reviews on this one. Some people love it, some people hate it. I'm personally in the camp of people that loved it. This was so on par with books like The Handmaid's Tale and also I Who Have Never Known Men. So if you loved both of those books, you will absolutely love The Unworthy. Then I read Fable for the End of the World by Ava Reid. This is her latest young adult novel that just came out fairly recently, so of course I wanted to get my hands on it. This book is described as sort of The Last of Us meets The Hunger Games, which you're following two characters, one named Anessa and one named Melanoe. Anessa lives with her mother and her brother in a half-sunken town in Kairos, which is where they all live, and they are just scraping to get by. Anessa's mother has racked up an enormous amount of debt, which makes one of her children eligible to participate in the Lamb's Gauntlet, which is sort of this live streamed assassination spectacle. This is sort of like where the Hunger Games comparison comes in. Melanoe is a Kairos assassin, so she is trained to kill these sacrificial lambs in the Lamb's Gauntlet. She herself is sort of a product of neural reconditioning, and she's had a lot of physiological altercations to sort of make her this living weapon or a super soldier. As the games begin, Anessa and Melanoe have a ton on the line. They have everything to lose. As their paths begin to intertwine, both girls start to question everything. Anessa is really questioning whether there's more to life than just survival, and Mel begins to wonder if she is capable of more than just killing. And against all odds, they may also be falling in love with each other. This book was interesting. It definitely reads super YA. I think if I was a teenager, I probably would have eaten this up. So I'm not quite the ideal audience for this book, although I do still very much enjoy YA. I didn't love this book. I thought it had really great promise and the premise sounded incredible. I just didn't find some of the scenarios and situations that they were in to be very believable. It felt very forced and unnatural to me. I thought it was a decent read. I thought it was entertaining. The world was very interesting. The concept was super interesting, but I just think it's been done better before. And the last book that I read in Q1 was actually another book club pick. It was the Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels. This is also a hilarious and whimsical tale where you follow a character named Cecilia, who is the ideal Victorian lady and also a member of the Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels. You're also following a character named Ned, who is smitten with Cecilia and also under direct orders to kill her by somebody who intends to destroy the Wisteria Society and restore patriarchy back to its former glory. Ned and Cecilia are forced to team up to save the women that raised her and also prove that she is as much of a scoundrel as the rest of them. This book was absolutely hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. It made me and so many of the girls in my book club actually laugh out loud. So funny, so lighthearted and whimsical. The plot was all over the place. But like the page by page, line by line banter in this book is honestly like just worth reading it on its own. It's so funny. So if you're good with like no plot, just vibes, you will really like this book. Also, the audiobook really like amps up the level of like whimsy and hilarious banter. It's so good. And those are the 13 books that I read in Q1. I'm hoping Q2 I'm going to be able to do a little bit more, although some of the books that I'm currently reading are very long. If you saw my April TBR, I'm like diving into some like very longer high fantasy stories, which take me a little while to get through, obviously, because there's so much happening, so much world building going on. But I'm still hoping I can kind of fly through some of these books. I've tried to have in some shorter, easier reads in addition to like my longer fantasy reads, but I'm just like, I need to get through some of these fantasy books because I am determined to go through some of my TBR. So wish me luck. So make sure to subscribe. I appreciate everybody who has already. You're the best. And I'll catch you guys next time.